Outside the Lines First Report.
The 2009-2010 NBA Coach of the Year.
As Oklahoma City proudly embraces the Thunder, a team on its way up the NBA totem pole.
Durant all the way!
The city that begat that team, Seattle, watches in a collective daze, confused whether to root for or against the franchise that it embraced for 4 decades. Today on Outside the Lines, what really happened to the Sonics, what their fans do for their NBA fix now, and the lessons fans in cities like Memphis, Charlotte, and Sacramento need to learn from the saga of the Seattle Sonics.
And now, sitting in for Bob Lee, Steve Bunin.
Even with last night's loss, the Oklahoma City Thunder has made its mark on these NBA playoffs, pushing the Lakers to at least a Game 6 in their first-round series. Meanwhile, the city of Seattle remains thunderstruck by the confluence of events that led the franchise to leave the Pacific Northwest 2 years ago after 41 years in existence. This week, the critically acclaimed film Sonicsgate makes its East Coast premiere in New York City, documenting the tragicomic letdowns by the local and state government, Commissioner David Stern, former team owner Howard Schultz, current owner Clay Bennett, and a host of others. Sonicsgate poignantly chronicles the rise and demise of the Seattle Supersonics.
Today, we stand before you filled with both great emotion and renewed hope and enthusiasm for professional basketball in the Northwest region.
It is our desire to have the Sonics and Storm remain in Seattle. Sonics, Storm, and Seattle are synonymous. We have great respect for history.
This is about us. This is about Seattle. This is about making sure that the NBA and the nation know that they can't come in and just take something from us and think we're going to lie down.
5 years ago, when I sat here and was in a position to buy the team, I remember saying that I viewed this as my responsibility as part of the public trust.
Public trust. He talked a lot about being a steward of the public trust and of the institution, and I believe that. But coming from him, I think it was just all empty rhetoric. I think coming from him, there is a lot of empty rhetoric.
He tried to run a basketball team like his coffee business. Your coffee business can't be run like a basketball team.
I've said repeatedly what our intentions are, and that's what they are, is to be successful here.
It was a very well done manipulation, and they took advantage of a lot of circumstances here.
We made it. Congratulations. The NBA will be in Oklahoma City next season, playing their games.
It was like fighting against a hurricane. Yeah, you have hope the hurricane's not going to blow your house down. But good luck with that.
Now you're in this sort of competitive world where if you want a team, the NBA squeezes the city and says, look, if you want a team, yeah, you got to pay for it.
The problem with this issue is that it is a national issue fought locally.
Nichols sold this city out, period.
I put the primary blame at this point on the Washington State Legislature and especially its leadership.
No more Sonics makes no sense at all to me.
I wanted somebody to reach in and say, okay, I got you guys, we're not moving.
Pitiful cries to a disinterested God. That's what I kept thinking.
Keep the team here! You hear me, Bennett? Save our Sonics!
The thing is, if we get a team, it's going to be somebody else's team. To get a team, I'm going to have to break the hearts of people just like me. And that's the only way we're going to get a team.
The NBA declined our request for Commissioner David Stern or subsequently any NBA employee to come on today's show. With that, we welcome in Chris Van Dyke, the co-founder of Citizens for More Important Things. Chris led the campaign of a Seattle initiative that passed with a 70% majority prohibiting the city from using tax dollars to build stadiums. Steve Kelly, longtime sports columnist at the Seattle Times, one of the most prominent and consistent critics of the team's move, who just last week wrote about the paradox of being an NBA fan in Seattle now. And Scott Soshnick of Bloomberg News, whose scathing column today called the whole situation just plain sad. Gentlemen, welcome. Steve Kelly, let me start with you. What ultimately caused the Sonics to leave Seattle?
I think it's more who caused it, and there's several who's. But at the top of it is the mayor, Greg Nichols. He sold us down the river. But Howard Schultz, the day Howard Schultz sold the team to Clay Bennett, he knew they were gone. Clay Bennett is guilty. And above all, I think David Stern, because David Stern, for whatever reason, couldn't wait to get out of here. And in a lot of people's estimation, including mine here, he's a bum who disrespected the game. Here's a guy who keeps fining all the coaches for criticizing the officials and saying that they're guys like Phil Jackson, who are monsters in this game, and he fines them for disrespecting the game. Well, nobody disrespected the game more than David Stern when he turned his back on 41 years of history here. He disrespected the city. He disrespected all the city stood for the NBA, and he ultimately is the biggest bum of all these guys. We also welcome in the director of the film Sonicsgate, Jason Reed from New York City. Jason, what do you think ultimately caused the Sonics to leave Seattle?
Well, I'd say it was a number of things. First off, the CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, who owned the team for 5 years, sold the team to Clay Bennett. Clay Bennett was an Oklahoma businessman. He clearly wanted to move the team to Oklahoma. So Clay Bennett's to blame as well. David Stern let it happen under his watch. And then you have to look at the state government of Washington and the local city leaders, including Greg Nichols, who basically sold out the city for $45 million by accepting a settlement and letting the team move to Oklahoma City.
Chris Van Dyke, what do you think caused the Sonics to leave?
Oh, I think the NBA, in its current structure, caused the Sonics to leave. If anything did, I'm not sure it's the players. It's interesting listening to people's comments, but given the structure of professional sports in the United States and the way they are played, I think they're going to do what they're going to do so long as they are structured this way without any very, very tight control by the federal government.
Scott, where do you stand?
Well, I point this at arrogance, and if you're looking for one villain, you're not going to find it. There are many villains in this, but I point the finger of blame mostly at Howard Schultz because he was the local guy. He was the guy who repeatedly called the team a civic trust, and he knew the lease agreement going in. He just thought that he was suave enough to convince the taxpayers to pony up the funds just like they did for baseball and football. And when they said no, he did not commit to keeping the team there. He sold it to a guy who, by the way, never even took the time to establish a local address. I wrote about this at the time, that he handed me his business card, Clay Bennett did, and it said Oklahoma City on it. That's all I needed to say to see about his intentions. That team was gone the minute he bought it.
Steve, what role did stadium fatigue play in the Sonics' departure?
I'm sorry, stadium fatigue? Well, I think that had something to do with it because we'd already paid for the Safeco Field for the Mariners and Quest Field for the Seahawks. But my argument was, did those turn out badly? I think those turned out pretty well. I think it was more fatigue at the fact, first of all, I think everybody here thought it was a fait accompli the day that Howard sold the team to Clay Bennett. But I think the city had seen almost 10 years of bad basketball, with one exception, 2005. And so the level of interest had plummeted. And then Clay Bennett came in and totally stripped the team. And I think a lot of the interest in the team disappeared at that point.
Jason, what was your chief goal with this film?
Well, basically, we wanted to preserve the history of the Seattle Supersonics, first and foremost. We also wanted to educate the public on the issue and what happened here. We felt like the issue is largely swept under the rug nationally, and we wanted to hold the parties accountable. And ultimately, we wanted to send a message to sports fans that no team is truly safe in this modern era, despite the rich history, despite a strong fan base. 41 years of history the Sonics were in Seattle, and they were able to move away relatively easily. And so I think we wanted to send a message to sports fans around the nation that no team is truly safe.
Steve, what did the national media not get about this story?
Well, with a few exceptions, I don't think they cared, and I think that was part of the problem. As they say in Jason's film, this was a national issue being played locally in Seattle. And I think it is a huge warning signal to Memphis, Sacramento, Charlotte, New Orleans, that it can happen to you, and probably in some cases is going to happen to you unless you bow down to His Honor, the Smiley Commissioner.
Scott, that's what you wrote about today. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's very tough to be calling David Stern a bum. I have talked to him throughout the decades now about franchise relocation. And when Vancouver left to go to Memphis, he told me it was one of his biggest failures as commissioner. He used to view franchise relocation as failure. But he's changed. I mean, that's the reality now, is that it's just business. Those were his words to me. It's just business. Never before has the curtain been removed. David Stern is not the all-powerful wizard pulling strings. He, in reality, works for the owners. They pay his salary. It's his job to do what is in their best interest, and they are all scared that one day they will be the ones making the petition to go elsewhere. So they don't dare say no to somebody else right now.
Chris, go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
And in the meantime, you just disrespect an entire city and you turn your back on 41 years. And I think that's a warning signal to the rest of the NBA. That's how little they care about each and every franchise. It could happen to you and you and you. And that is on the commissioner. And it was bad business leaving Seattle. I guarantee you, if the Sonics were here now with this team that Sam Presti has put together so marvelously, this city would be crazy. And for Seattle, it would be just like the Mariners were in 1995. The town there would be a new arena. Kevin Durant would be the new Ken Griffey Jr., and this team would be here forever and make a lot of money for the NBA.
Chris, go ahead, Chris, you jump in.
I think that's what the voters here in Seattle recognized. We actually got 74.6% of the vote. The voters realized that the teams had become much like ladies of the night, if you will. And I'm not sure where that fits in with the bum analogy, but they're just here temporarily to make their dollars or protect the investment of the owner. The prices of the teams have gotten way out of sync with their true economic value, and the voters here just called the cards. The arena had been substantially rebuilt, not 11 or 12 years earlier. They were scratching their heads. At the time, it was just prior to the new stadia for football and baseball coming onto the political agenda. And at that time, the then ownership of the Sonics was stating that, gee, they had rebuilt this without any tax dollars and everything. They weren't making a big deal about it, but they were kind of pointing to themselves as a proper or better economic model. Everything changes, and I think the voters just looked up, and there was an element of voter fatigue or stadium fatigue. It was much easier for us, and from our point of view, with the Sonics than with the two prior teams. I will also say that if Oklahoma had set out to intentionally discourage Seattle voters or push away the vote of Seattle voters, they could not have done a better job. We had no work to do. They literally did it themselves.
Jason, I saw you shaking your head. What's your take?
Well, I'd say that, yeah, by trading away Ray Allen and kind of dismantling the team the way they did, yeah, they were good moves for the future, as we're seeing with Oklahoma City's success, but it alienated the fan base here, who was already slightly alienated by Howard Schultz's ownership group, trading away Gary Payton and doing some things. So I think that, yeah, the climate was perfect for Chris Van Dyke's group to come in and kind of convince the public through all the means necessary to vote for this I-91, which is what he's referring to.
One of the turning points in the film is the PR hit that you guys document about David Stern and Clay Bennett taking when emails between the two became public. This was August 2007, right after Bennett's chief financial backer, Aubrey McClendon, told the Oklahoma City Journal-Record, quote, "We didn't buy the team to keep it in Seattle. We hoped to come here," end quote. That preceded this. Take a look.
Stern to Bennett, it pains me to see the situation you are in, and I have difficulty conjuring a happy ending in Seattle, but I appreciate your efforts and very greatly value our friendship. Bennett to Stern, you know how I feel about our relationship, both personally and professionally. I view you as a role model and as an extraordinarily gifted executive, a deep and compassionate thinker. You are just one of my favorite people on earth, and I so cherish our relationship.
I think that it showed that there was a relationship between those two men that may have been closer than Stern had with other owners.
Now, just this weekend, Commissioner Stern said this about a franchise returning to Seattle, quote, "We stayed in touch with them, and when there's an NBA-style building in Seattle or plans for one, it would be my guess that would be a place we'd be very interested in talking about. I don't blame the fans for thinking of however they think of us. I think we didn't get the job done collectively in Seattle, ownership, government, repeating government, and league." Steve Kelly, you called David Stern a bum. What do those comments signify to you?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of a sucker for a love story, and those emails kind of broke me up a little bit. So let me gather my composure for a second. You know, David Stern said what he said because I think he knew this show was coming on and he wanted to say something. I know that Steve Ballmer and David Stern have talked. Steve Ballmer is the CEO of Microsoft and loves basketball. He goes down to Portland and sits with Paul Allen quite frequently at the Trailblazer games. And he would be a terrific owner, and he's exactly the kind of owner the NBA needs. But as the commissioner said, until we get a building, or at least a remodeled Key Arena, nothing's going to happen, and I don't see any movement for that at all.
Jason, where was Steve Ballmer in this picture before the team left?
Well, basically, as Clay Bennett decided to move the team and made it public with his intentions, Steve Ballmer and some other local Seattle businessmen came forward with a plan to renovate Key Arena, a $300 million plan where they were going to donate $150 million to the city of Seattle to renovate Key Arena. The city of Seattle guaranteed the other $75 million, and all we needed was $75 million authorized by the state legislature to give King County the power to do that, and we would have had an ownership team and a plan in place before the Board of Governors meeting in 2008 when they voted to move the team to Oklahoma City, or to allow the move. And so Steve Ballmer was there. It was late in the game, but that was a game-changing moment that I think our local state government just let our community down. We had a chance to take $150 million and basically Oklahoma passed a funding package at the same time. Well, at the Board of Governors meeting, it was an easy pitch for them to say, hey, Oklahoma's people, their fans, they gave money and allowed the taxes to be taken. And the people of Seattle weren't supportive, or at least the government read the people of Seattle as not wanting this, when in fact, sports fans and people throughout the whole state did want to get this done. So I think that Steve Ballmer's $150 million was unprecedented. And Steve Kelly said earlier, that's an ideal public-private partnership. And that's what Chris Van Dyke's I-91 was all about, was to make sure that there was a public-private partnership that was, gave value back to the city, and so the city wasn't losing money on these stadiums. And if you look at Safeco and Quest Field, I think these are two great examples of how well a public-private partnership can work, and that could have worked had our state government stepped up at that time, but unfortunately they didn't.
Yeah, but
go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the Ballmer proposal that's being talked about met the terms of I-91. And we expressed that to the state legislators at the time. However, Clayton Bennett, to use a basketball term, was running the clock, and given the political antipathy toward doing anything, it took time. It would take time. It took time for legislators. Legislators were hearing overwhelmingly from people on both sides of the issue, but we were trying to make a case that, and working with the Save Our Sonics folks to make a case, as we said we would, when a proposal came forward that met the terms of I-91.
Scott?
Looked at as a, and that was what was happening. I don't think there's any blame there for the legislature. I think the true blame is on Clayton Bennett, and it was the objective of Bennett to move the team. And I think the NBA has an objective that they want to play in smaller markets. I don't think they want to be in a major media market like Seattle, 13th largest in the country, and playing against the Sonics, or not Sonics, but baseball and football for that entertainment dollar.
Chris, let me move on. Chris, Scott, Scott, the irony is, Scott, that if, barring expansion, to get a team back to Seattle, it'll come at another city's expense, the one we've talked about, Sacramento, New Orleans, Charlotte, Memphis. What does that signify?
Well, it signifies what I'd like to say, and you throw the cold water in the faces of the fans that, guess what, folks? These are not public trusts. You better believe these are businesses. That should not shock anybody. An NBA team is no different than the local Walmart coming in. They're there to make a profit. They are vanity plays for these owners. And the minute they start to drain the funds, and if the core businesses of these guys aren't doing well, which they are not doing now during the financial crisis, they will look to get themselves out of that situation no matter what. Public be damned. They will dump the team to make their money. That is a sobering reality to fans. Wake up. This is a business. It is not just there for civic pride.
Steve Kelly, it's imperative. It's imperative.
Chris, let me ask Steve a question.
The cities of, well, I'd just like to say that the city of Sacramento and the city of Seattle and every other medium-sized city in the United States, they need to start working together and say no to the NBA, that if there's going to be another team in Seattle, it's going to be a new team, and it's not going to be taxpayers ripping off taxpayers.
Steve, go ahead.
Well, sometimes you have to hose Chris down, so we got to go under that assumption.
We're running out of time, though. What do you have?
The fact of the matter is, being in Seattle is good business. Steve Ballmer thought it was and was willing to step up. And the problem with this whole thing is the cynicism involved is it was a fait accompli. And by the time the Board of Governors met, this team was out of town, and there was nothing anybody could do about it, even though Ballmer and his group tried heroically.
Jason, last word to you. You direct the film. We've got about 15 seconds. What's it like now to be an NBA fan and watch the Thunder in the playoffs? What's it like?
It's painful. It's suffering. We drafted Kevin Durant in Seattle. We drafted Jeff Green. We drafted Russell Westbrook, and they moved the team 8 days later. And so watching them succeed just causes us sports fans in Seattle a lot of pain, and we really wish that this wouldn't have happened, and we could have still be watching the Seattle Supersonics playing the Lakers in this great first-round series.
Jason Reed, Chris Van Dyke, Steve Kelly, and Scott Soshnick, we appreciate all of your time on Outside the Lines. Our poll question to you, the viewers: which best describes your reaction when you found out the Sonics were relocating? Approval, disapproval, or indifference? Log on to vote. Go to ESPN.com, click on the video link, go to Outside the Lines. You can get on our interactive page. We'll reveal your answer coming up in a bit. A very close vote in our poll. What was your reaction to the relocation of the Sonics? Basically about a third, and a third. West of the country, almost all disapproved. Middle of the country, approved. And on the East Coast, mostly indifferent. With that, we thank you for watching Outside the Lines First Report. I'm Steve Bunin. College Football Live is next.